Hey everyone, welcome back to Secret Sonics. This is episode 106 with Justin Craig. I had a great conversation with Justin, and we talked about so many things, including his journey, coming up in Lexington, Kentucky, moving to New York, working as a musical director for Hedwig and the Angry Inch on Broadway. We talked about his approach to production, playing multiple instruments, and how that's a massive part of what he does. We also talked about his approach to mixing, how he gets massive drum sounds out of a very small recording studio space. And we talked about overcoming imposter syndrome and all the other things that come along with being a music producer these days. So with all that to say, I think you're going to enjoy this conversation. So without further ado, here's my conversation with Justin Craig here on Secret Sonics. You're listening to Secret Sonics, a podcast exploring the creative side of music production. Join us weekly for honest conversations with real-world music producers and audio professionals. Hello and welcome back to Secret Sonics. I am your host, Ben Wallach. My guest today is Justin Craig. Justin is a Grammy-nominated record producer and music director based in New York City. Since 2006, he has performed in 49 states and 7 countries. Former guest of the show, Dwayne Lundy, recommended I reach out to Justin, who's graciously agreed to join me on the air. So with all that to say, welcome to Secret Sonics, Justin.
Ben, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. So just tell the audience a little bit about yourself. You know, how did music become a thing for you? And how did it become production and I guess musical directing and all the other things that you're doing?
Where to begin? It's a long story. My parents love music, so there was a lot of really good music going on in the house all the time. I guess I would say my dad is a bit of an audiophile, so he always had the highest, fiest equipment and speakers and great sounding audio equipment. And looking back, that probably got me going and really interested in just sound and sonics and everything. I mean, outside the music, of course, I'm hearing the Beatles and it's blowing my mind as a kid.
Yeah.
And other things like prog rock and just the classic stuff. So, you know, I wanted to play guitar from an early age. And I think my parents got me one when I was 12. And I just started teaching myself from the Beatles chord book and Mel Bay scales and stuff like that. But yeah, mostly self-taught. My dad could play some chords and help me strum along, so that was helpful. And then from there, you know, getting into high school and falling in love with, you know, just The Cure, Radiohead, some more grungy stuff in the 90s.
That's my jam also.
Yeah, and Tom Petty was huge for me when I was that age. Mike Campbell still to this day is like my favorite lead guitar player. Maybe a close second to George Harrison. But so I'm listening to all this music and I'm starting to play in bands and just find my way. So that was kind of it. When I was like 17, you interviewed Dwayne Lundy back a few episodes back on your podcast.
Yeah.
And when I was like 17 or 18, he produced my band. I was in high school and he was kind of, I guess at the time he was a few years in to his production stuff and he had a studio at his house and anyways, we had this great time and I think he must have seen something in me or we just had like a great recording experience and eventually he started calling me back in for like session work as a guitarist or, you know, maybe hitting a drum or something like that. And eventually his studio moved to a different spot. He got this huge space and was getting all these artists coming through, just a ton of different people coming through to work with him. And he was calling me up to be on the sessions as a multi-instrumentalist. And eventually, like, he kind of sat me down and was like, you know, I think you're a producer, or in so many words, something like that. And so he really helped me out. He was a big mentor figure in my life. And just
that's amazing that he proactively mentored you. Like, you know, you didn't even ask for it. He's just like, hey, you did good with the guitar. You know, why don't you come over and help me out with the set? You know, and just like brought you into the fold.
Well, I was always interested in records and how they were put together, and just listening to, like I said, my dad's music and George Martin like, what's going on there? Like trying to unpack all the layers of those Beatles records and like Jeff Lynne's work where he's, just so many layers of sound and it's crazy. And I was always just super fascinated by that and how you can create these little universes on record. And so all those sessions and years spent working with Dwayne, we were experimenting and figuring out how to do that stuff. And just like, it was a really exploratory time. And I look back really fondly on that because I realized that just like playing guitar, I'm more self-taught and I never really took lessons or went to school. With the recording stuff and the producing, it was really learning by doing. And I did have help, obviously, Dwayne guiding a lot of that experience. But we were kind of just doing it. Like, I think audio school and recording school is amazing. And I probably have a lot to learn technically that I don't know. But there's something too about like not having some of that knowledge.
Yeah.
And you're just in the trenches and you're making a record with someone, and the artist is sitting there, like, you just have to figure it out. And it's kind of,
I love that.
It's a fun way to.
It's some of like my favorite songwriters like don't know any music theory, right? Like,
right.
Like does Paul McCartney know much, music theory? Maybe by now he does.
No,
but
I think he still doesn't. I was just watching.
Yeah.
He's got this.
Oh my God,
the Rick Rubin thing, and I think
I'm in the middle of it.
Yeah. He's just.
I actually had to get a VPN and sign up for a free
God.
month of Hulu to watch it.
It's fun. It's
I couldn't hold back.
Yeah.
But it's amazing. If not knowing the rules sometimes helps you break them, or
Yeah.
or there's something. There was a guest on my show named Layla Mohemani who was talking about like if you're still a novice or there's like a naivety to the way you produce, there could be something novel there that's interesting to people who wouldn't think that way because they have like a set these are the rules, this is how you do it, and you could really exploit that, I think.
Yeah.
Also as a producer.
Yeah, and you're just coming at it from it could be like a more artistic way of thinking. You're like, in my mind, I hear this sound. How do we get that sound? It's not happening yet. And then you're like, all right, pulling your hair out, trying to get something to sound a certain way or feel a certain way. It's kind of trial by fire, and I kind of like working that way, honestly. Like still like maintaining a little bit of that naive mindset and just coming at something from like let's discover this thing together collaboratively. Yeah.
I'm sure you did have to get on the YouTube University train at some point. And,
oh my God.
And obviously Dwayne, I'm sure, gave you a lot of resources himself, right?
Oh yeah,
like,
Dwayne's a genius. He's an amazing producer, and just in the studio, he's just a great spirit. I can't say enough about Dwayne. But yeah, when we were doing that, and when I was starting out, it was kind of pre-YouTube era, and like I didn't have a computer, I didn't have a laptop. Like I wasn't, I was still on like using a cassette 4-track at home, and like even like one of those CDR burning multi-tracks from like Korg or something, which I love. I love all those old gadgets because it's almost like working on a tape deck or like the old analog way of thinking, just learning how to layer sounds that way. But yeah, of course, even now I'm on YouTube, like checking out people's techniques, listening to Mix with the Masters interviews. I mean, all that stuff is such a great resource, and I definitely use it now. And I would have used it then, but it was kind of fun not having that in a way at the time. I mean, some of it existed, obviously, but I don't really remember leaning on it all that much.
Yeah. My memory of the early days of me getting started, which I imagine was like maybe a few years after you, it was still like the Gear Sluts era.
Yeah.
And, I'm like looking to buy my first mic and I go on Gear Sluts and all I feel is like, oh man, they make you feel like a noob, and that wasn't fun.
No,
not fun times.
That's not fun at all.
Yeah.
You kind of have to, I personally kind of have to steer clear of those forums because there's going to be one person that says something super insightful and helpful, and they bear their knowledge, to the world, and that's awesome. And then there's 100 comments of people saying that they're doing it wrong or they don't know what they're talking about. It feels a little toxic sometimes, but Not to say, that's not like a generalization or across the
No,
board.
the internet is clearly a vehicle of good and bad, and it's just about how you use it.
Exactly. Yeah.
And it's hard as a user of the internet to discern sometimes.
Yeah.
Anyways, so I wanted to ask you. So at some point you moved to Brooklyn, and you're involved in Broadway shows.
Yeah.
And like musical directing. Like, tell me a bit about that transition, moving, I guess, from Lexington to Brooklyn.
Yeah. Well, how did that happen? Let's see. I was touring a lot with a band called These United States and making records with them. I mean, we were touring a lot. It was kind of nuts. But through that, I did meet my wife, Lavinia Jones-Wright. She's an amazing creator and artist, actor, filmmaker. We met through like mutual friends in bands, and she was playing with a band called Adam Arkaraji. She was working at ASCAP. She was really involved in music in New York. She was a journalist. She was writing about bands and going to see bands, and so we met through that and through friends. And eventually, I started spending my time in between tours here in New York instead of going back to Kentucky or whatever.
Yeah.
And then it stuck, and then I left that band and was here permanently. And let's see, another huge figure, mentor and dear friend of mine named Stephen Trask, who wrote the songs for Hedwig and The Angry Inch, which is a massive, amazing thing. He's also a film composer, just another genius person in my life. He recommended me for a job because he knew I wanted to be in New York, and he was trying to help me out. He recommended me for a job playing in a Broadway pit.
Yeah.
And that worked out, and I started playing this gig. I was in New York. I had a job. I was feeling really great. And I was actually learning a lot about that world too, like the theater world, which was completely new to me. But I kind of fit right in, and it all went really, really well, and I made a bunch of friends. And then shortly after that, his show, Hedwig and the Angry Inch, was going up to Broadway as a revival of sorts, because it was an off Broadway show like back in the 90s. But it was going.
Oh wow!
Yeah, that's how it started.
I didn't know that.
And then it was.
I remember
a film.
from when the movie came out.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Before the film, it was off Broadway.
Sure.
Down
as a native New Yorker, I know about those venues and stuff.
Downtown
totally.
at the Jane Street Theater. I don't know if you know that.
Yeah. My sister's actually an actress and her husband are actors in New York, and they're
cool.
They're in that zone.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So that show's going back to Broadway, and I had been working with Stephen for years. Another great, like I was saying, another great sort of mentorship experience was working with Stephen on film scores, and I even got to mix a couple of them. So we had this relationship of working on music together, and I think he really trusted me, and he asked me, "Will you music direct my show when it goes to Broadway?" And I was like, "Yeah, hell yeah!" So I was super excited about it, and it was an amazing experience. It was one of the greatest experiences of my life working on that show.
Wow, so crazy! How long did that run?
We did about a year and a half on Broadway, and then there was a tour about a year later, and that it went all over for about a year, something like that.
Wow, that's so wild.
Yeah.
So I assume you're expecting this question, but like, now that you're mostly back in the production game and, having done this, musical directing, what would be your big takeaway from, directing the music of a play into the production world,
Yeah. That's a good question. I guess with me, everything that I do, I come at it as a musician, like first, because that's where I feel comfortable and that's where I feel at home. Just trying to infuse my musicality and my language into what I'm working on. And I want to say that like music directing and producing are entirely different jobs. And in some ways they are, but in some ways they kind of require very similar skill sets, if that makes sense.
Yeah. What would be those skill sets if you were to point them out,
Well, just thoroughly knowing the music that you're working on, for one, and being very confident and having enough theory. Like I'm not I'm not trained and I didn't go to school, but I have enough theory under my belt to be able to talk about drum parts and bass parts and really sort of direct performances and singers and make vocal harmony stack adjustments on the fly and stuff like that, which is all kind of stuff you do in a studio session as a producer, really working on dynamics and tempo and kind of just guiding the experience. And
Yeah, it sounds like you need to have like maybe a bit more confidence or assertiveness in like a situation where you're doing a live show than maybe in the studio, where you could kind of like take your time maybe and like, think things out over, hash it out a bit more.
Yeah.
Like I feel like it's like you have to be on top of it, no?
Yeah, you do. Yeah, I mean, like the Broadway thing's high pressure. And one thing that I'm not necessarily, like it's not necessarily in my nature to take on a leadership role like that. Because when you're the MD, you really are highly responsible for a lot of what happens in the music department. So that was actually something that I think that I came in naive enough about some of that to just like be myself, and then I'm learning as I go how to best communicate with everyone. And I think if you're cool and you approach every situation from like a loving, nurturing way, that you're going to get great results. And I think that same goes in the studio. If you're producing a session, you are kind of in charge, and you are kind of, you have to be a good communicator. That's like one of the major skills of being a music director and being a music producer. And those things really, they translate from the studio to the stage for me.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah.
It's great that you were able to just get in there and like have that opportunity and just go for it in that moment,
Yeah. I'm not perfect for everything, like the majority of shows on Broadway that are musicals, I don't belong there, music directing that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I'm very much a rock pop person, and like I said, I'm a slow reader when it comes to charts and all that stuff. But something like Hedwig I think that I was actually pretty well suited for that job, and I think that I did a good job. And there are a lot more shows now that are kind of in that vein of like, this isn't a traditional musical. This is, whether it's a hip hop thing or a rock thing or a pop thing, it is kind of opening doors for different types of people to.
Right. Whether it's like Hamilton or, In the Heights and, that kind of stuff.
Exactly. And it's kind of fun. It's kind of fun to be able to dip into that world and just do what I do. And it works, I think.
Yeah, that's super cool, man. I'm glad you had that experience.
Thank you.
Sounds really awesome. I've talked about this before on the show. It's like I feel like almost jaded that I grew up in New York and just like my family, we would just go to Broadway shows like once a year or something,
Yeah.
And like I didn't realize that wasn't normal. You know what I mean? Like until later on. And New York is a crazy place. Let's talk about a little, I guess, into your production work with artists. How do artists find you, or how do you find them? Like, how do you usually connect with the people that work with you?
For the most part, I would say it's a word of mouth situation. I do get hit up randomly once in a while for a mix, or will you produce this song for us, or something like that. But usually it's someone that I've heard of, or someone that I know through someone else that I know. And I did a cool thing on that record, and then someone in that camp is like, you know what, will you do this other artist, something like that.
Yeah. Word of mouth seems to be the way it works for most people.
I find that the music industry, it just works like that. It kind of revolves around relationships.
Yes,
Really?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's one of my main takeaways from this podcast is it's all about, not just for me to meet people, but also just like, people who I've had on the show, just if you know people, if you're a good person, if you're a good hang, like you said, like if you're cool, like it's the social lubrication that, we need to kind of like keep things going,
Yeah.
Okay, so an artist walks in, they have this song. What's the first thing you do? What does the workflow look like for you?
It depends on the song. It depends on the artist. Usually I let the song guide my decisions I mean, I don't want to think like I'm super heavy-handed producer, but I dig into the song. Before we hit record, I want to talk about the song, even lyrics sometimes. I'm not going to change your meaning or anything like that behind what you want to say as an artist. But if a lyric catches me off and I'm like, I think there's a better way that you can say that or phrase that, I don't always have to do that. A lot of times, the person I'm working with is way more of a lyrical genius than I could ever be, and so I lay off. But sometimes it's a thing that I get into. I like to look at the chord structures. I like to look at voicings, and I like to really find tempo and key before we even record. And then, depending on the situation, if it's a band, we'll hit it. We'll start finding it, and we'll play. I like to play too. A lot of the records I make, I sort of become a member of the band, and most people are cool with that. I do, like I said,
that's super cool.
I try to bring my musicality and my language to something, and the easiest way for me to do that is to shut my mouth and just pick up a guitar and let's get into it, or sit down at the drums and play the drums. I do love playing drums. I'm not a professional, but I love playing drums.
Right. So cool.
And if it's just an artist, not a band, and I'm building the track or, taking care of more of that stuff, maybe we'll just lay it down to, maybe we'll just work on the feel and the groove, because that's aside from the vocal and the melody, to me, the second most important thing is the groove of the track and how it's moving and the tempo. And so we'll work on that, and maybe I'll record the drums first. Maybe I'll record an acoustic guitar first just to get the feel, and we get a vocal down that's feeling pretty good. And then sometimes the artist will go away, and I'll just
sit with it,
or I'll just start throwing paint at the wall here at my studio, and until I feel like it's something I can share with them and say, what do you think of this? What do you think of this vibe? Honestly, through the pandemic, just not being able to be in the room with each other, a lot of it was that I would send a fully realized track and say, what do you think of this? And it's either right or it's not. And then you break it back down. A lot of my songs that I produce see 4 versions, 5 versions.
Oh my gosh.
We didn't get it. Something's not right. Take everything out except the drums, or take everything out except that bass line that's cool, and let's try again.
Yeah.
And I have so many songs like that. And I love that process. I really do. Sometimes, and this has happened a couple of times in the last few months, where I get the demo or a demo of a song, and I'm I'll put it on my iTunes, or not, whatever it's called now, and I'll go for a run or something.
Apple Music.
Yeah. I'll go for a jog, and I'll listen to the demos that I'm meant to be working on, and there'll be a song and it blows me over, and I'm I hear everything in that moment. I know exactly what to do. And that's rare when that happens, but that's a fun process too, because you hear the record in your mind and you try to figure out how to put it down.
That rarely happens for me also. Occasionally.
Yeah.
But usually I'm throwing paint at the wall until something feels right.
I like both. I think both processes are really fun, and you can always get the result you want as long as you're willing to put in the work. But there's been a couple songs recently where I was holy shit, that is the best song I've heard in a long time, and I'm just so excited to help realize that.
Get into it.
Yeah, exactly. I hope I can curse.
That's amazing.
On the pod.
Oh yeah, go for it. I got the big E at the bottom.
Oh, sweet.
I don't curse very much because I only curse when I'm driving.
Yeah.
And my wife gets upset at me because we have a 2.5-year-old and he's parroting me. And oh my God, he finally said what the F, and it was okay, don't respond, don't react.
Oh no.
And it's only because of car. It's only because of when I'm in the car.
Right.
But totally cool on the podcast.
Okay.
Yeah, what I was gonna say was I love the thing about you getting in the band and playing guitar, because I feel and also the whole thing of your musicality, and I really relate to that. And as a producer, like using my musicality is what at the end of the day works. And so because I'm a bass player, if I pick up a bass, it's very often going to lead in a direction that's going to work for the song, because that's just how, I don't know, my musical brain works and gravitates. And like, it's also playing to my strengths, right? Like it's okay, this is what I really know how to do. So let's make something work with this element.
Right.
You know, that's natural to me, you know? I don't know.
Yeah.
There's something really neat about that.
Totally.
Is it always the guitar when you're joining the band?
No. Often it is, just because that instrument is like an extension of me at this point. I play piano a lot, or you know, it could be just like building some weird loop or synth bed that the band or the artist can like really perform over. So anything that like helps create the mood or bring out some emotion, like those are the kind of records that I really love, is when the production is just a stage for the singer or the song to really shine.
Yeah. So I take it like the artists you work with, I mean, if they're bands, right? They're comfortable with, you know, you're not really working with bands where like it's just the three of us or just the four of us, and you know, that's it. But I guess most productions aren't like that these days, anyways. It's happened. It's happened. It has happened.
But yeah, usually not. Usually, before I'm producing any artist or band, we've had a lot of conversations, and we've talked about goals, and we've talked about process, and you know, sometimes it's, hey, let's rent this 16-track tape machine and go to that cabin for 3 weeks, which I've done.
Nice.
And I love those experiences. But other times it's like, it's not that. And sometimes, yeah, there have been occasions where I'm just recording the band and I'm trying to produce them from the control room, or you know, in a sense.
Yeah.
And that's a different thing. It's not my preference. I like to kind of like get my hands dirty and like you know, work on it as a player, or just be in the room. And the energy is so important when you're recording, I think, with other artists.
Yeah, totally. Well, one thing I noticed about your productions that I listened to before we got on this call is you have these really larger than life organic drum sounds.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah, I'm just curious about your approach to drums. We'll hear it later on in the sauce segment, but are you tracking drums in your studio?
Yeah.
Are you go? Yeah,
it's ridiculous. So you've lived in Brooklyn.
Yes, for 22 years of my life.
You know that recording drums is like this far off idea that you'll never achieve in your own bedroom, studio, or whatever. So I've had a lot of experiences recording in Brooklyn before I had my own space, and it was like, oh, we have to rent a studio. It's $1,000 or more or whatever for the drum day, and then you get all the drums all at once, and then that's that, and it's not ideal, right?
Got to clean up the dirty work.
Yeah. What I've been doing now that I have this space, which is still very small, I like tight, dead, punchy drum sounds anyways.
1970s.
So here we are in this small space, and that's all I can get. So
yeah, it's
fine. It's really more about how you treat them once they're in the box and once you're mixing. But I have a really crappy drum set that I stuff with pillows and towels and tune it low. And that's kind of my vibe right now. There are occasions where I'm like, man, I wish I could get big roomy thing going. And I can kind of achieve that with plugins and, you know, samples and stuff.
That's amazing.
I do use samples too.
Right, you like trigger, that kind of thing.
Yeah. But I do record in here, and I get pretty good sounds, I feel like.
That's awesome. And you're the drummer usually when this is happening? Or is it a member of the... Yeah.
Yeah, usually it's just me.
No shit. Wow, that's amazing.
Thank you.
I'm knowing to the audience, like I've heard a couple tracks, so you're gonna have to bear with us for a minute. Oh. I'm surprised that you're doing this all as like a multi instrumentalist in a bedroom in Brooklyn. That's kind of where my shock is at.
Yeah. Well, it's not a bedroom, but it is the bedroom sized.
Right. Right. Sorry. Yeah.
No worries.
As long as there's no bed in there, it's not a bedroom. Okay?
Exactly. There's no bed in here. But yeah, it's exactly the size of the bedroom.
Well, how do you mic the kit?
It depends. Usually I'm pretty minimal. I'll do sometimes I get up to like 10 mics, but that's a lot for me. I usually
that's minimal.
Yeah.
For 2021, I think.
Right. Yeah. I guess I understand covering your bases and over miking. If I had the room and the mics, I would maybe do more of that, but I don't. So I keep it pretty minimal. A dynamic mic on the kick, like a 57 on the snare. I have some KM84s that sound really good as overheads. I trash stuff out. I like distortion, and I like, I'll put a mic in a weird spot and run it through a guitar pedal, and sometimes that's the drum sound. But I usually record that way. And yeah, it's for me, I guess with the drums, it's more about the tuning and the dampening and the way that you hit the drums, like literally just the performance and the style in which you play. And for me, it's usually big, dead, punchy.
So I'm assuming you're hitting the drums pretty soft, right?
Yeah.
That kind of bigger transient.
If you hit them softer, then you can compress more and you can distort more. And it only gets fatter and bigger rather than if you're...
That's like the secret is,
it is
for fatter sounds, don't dig in as much. Also on the bass or the guitar, softer attacks.
Yeah, I think like the song that we're going to play later that I sent you, I'm hitting the drums like super quiet, very quiet. I'm just tapping them. But I was able to get like a real cool vibey sound out of that because, we've got all these toys in the computer now. So, but that's my stuff.
I'm forgetting the name of the producer who did. He's like very famous music producer who he did this whole tirade against Facebook, and like that video got taken down from the internet.
I don't remember.
Oh man, this was a couple years ago, and he just goes off about like, we've given up our privacy, blah 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 blah, and at the very end of the speech, he's like, "Oh yeah, so what's hip with music now is hitting the drums very soft." It's like after this whole like tirade about Facebook,
oh, no.
I was like, "This is so classic."
Wow.
And I'll remember it and I'll tell you later.
Yeah,
it's a very famous producer, and that was a hilarious moment for me just by myself watching that. Wait. So maybe you could talk a little bit. Maybe we'll talk more about drums after the sauce segment.
Sure.
But do you have any other any other tried and true techniques that you're using on a daily basis with the productions that you're working on?
Tried and true
that you think are maybe unique to you, or unique-ish to you? Because there's nothing fully unique anymore.
No. I guess for me, so a bit about my production style. Trying to be self-aware right now. I have a real fascination with super lo-fi combined with super hi-fi. And I love the concept of contrast in audio where, for instance, you've got this like, I don't know, do you like Fleetwood Mac?
I love Fleetwood Mac. Sure.
Do you like Tusk?
Sure.
Okay. Well, Tusk is one of my favorite albums. And it's interesting to me that they're like, at the time, like the biggest band in the world, biggest budget of all time for any record or something crazy. And
more than Rumors.
I think so. And you've got these really shiny radio Rumors like tracks up against these homemade, crunchy, bizarre songs that Lindsey Buckingham was cooking up in his home studio. And I'm just obsessed with that album, and it was a huge thing for me. And I think that I carry that into my work is just like really the juxtaposition between something that's really pristine and something that's just like kind of weirdly wrong or, crunchy, distorted, or just doesn't sound great. The other thing that I do...
I would say the White Album is kind of like that also.
Oh my God. The White Album is totally that.
Yeah.
Again, like a band like of that stature, just like putting out something so experimental. I think that's really cool. Another
Yeah.
one for me is like, I have never been great at producing a song fully in the box with samples or sample packs. And I clearly use samples and I use VSTs and, native instruments and some of those things from time to time. But I've never been very good at inspiring myself starting from there. So
Yeah.
what I really try to do is record things in the real world, whether it's in my studio or just any like real sound that I'm making as a musician. Basically creating my own samples and then reusing them. And then once it's in the box, you can do whatever you want. You can.
That's when the mangling happens.
Yeah, you can mangle any sound until it fits in the production. But I find I get more excited and more inspired when those are human performances, even if it's a drum hit or, I know samples, a lot of them were created by humans in studios, but do you know what I'm getting at? Like if I'm...
Yeah, it's still exciting for you to pick up a mic and mic something and make something happen.
Yeah.
Versus just like, oh, this exists on my hard drive. Let me pull this in.
It's not fun for me to produce that way. I just love recording and I love making new recordings and new sounds. It always feels more exciting to me in the finished product when I didn't.
It's novel.
Yeah, exactly. That's all. So I think those two concepts. I love that. Those two concepts are they loom large in my thinking and in my studio work.
Wow, I love it, man. Yeah. It's funny. I was just talking with another person the other day on the podcast about I still haven't gotten Splice, and I know everyone's using Splice,
right?
And I feel like I'm the odd man out. And I probably will try it because I think it's about time.
I think it's incredible. That's all that to say. Like everyone has their process, and I've heard. I love modern pop music, and I listen to it, and I'm like, wow, this is so computer. Like heavy. It just sounds like computer music and it's incredible and it's sonically like just awesome. Like I do hear music like that. So I'm not you're not a purist. I'm not a purist and I'm not looking down on anybody else's process if they're using Splice or sample packs. That's awesome. Like do you. But for me to get excited when I'm building a track, it's more fun for me to be recording the sounds, even if they sound like samples later.
Yeah. No, I love the excitement of just being the person that does it and making it yourself.
Yeah.
I know you're a multi-instrumentalist and you're doing a lot of sounds by yourself. Do you ever seek outside help, like go to session musicians?
I do.
Anything like that?
Yeah, for sure. I know some great drummers, and if the song is like a certain vibe, like I said, I'm not a pro and I'm not suited for everything. I can kind of pull off a Ringo thing, and that's about it. Which is fun.
The best.
It's my favorite thing, but whatever. Sometimes the track calls for someone else, and I do have people that I love, and I guess that's the same for every instrument for me. Guitar is my main instrument, but I'm not shredding. I'm not like playing circles around people. I'm more of a feel person, and I try to do more with less, and like I'll play 3 notes and I'll make sure those 3 notes sound really soulful and with great feel. But if the track calls for something other than that, like I work with this band Moon City Masters, they are incredible musicians and they are full rock and roll. And I occasionally play on their records, but like if you ever hear the songs and there's like a guitar solo, that is not me. That is Taylor Steinberg. Like, I do work with other musicians that have way different feels, and it's amazing to hear what they do and see what they do and record them. I really love recording other players.
Yeah, totally. It's so fun to be just like tracking sometimes and not like for me. I'm assuming it's pretty similar to you. It's just when I'm producing a song, I'm playing instruments or the artist is playing the instruments and we're in the room and we're just kind of like switching off or whatever it is. And sometimes it's nice to just be like, okay, I'm just recording this.
Yeah.
And like, let's let the magic happen. I just put up the mic.
Are you bass and guitar? Is that? Those are your instruments?
So I play bass is my main instrument, but I do play guitar and piano at reasonable enough levels that I can
Cool.
do them on recordings depending on the level of difficulty.
Right.
So I tell people I could kind of do the John Mayer thing, but very very slowly. Like I can't do any of his fast riffs, but I play guitar like a bass player, so I
Cool.
could get about as fast as a bass player gets.
Nice. But then,
And piano, I got the chords and versions, no problem.
yeah, cool.
For the most part.
I bet that brings an interesting feel to your guitar playing then, coming at it from a bass player's brain. It's like, that's the stuff I love too about musicians and different people have, like, I constantly have to keep reminding myself, because I'll hear someone and I'm like, man, that's incredible. I can't do that. And then for a second, you're like, maybe I should quit guitar or whatever. But you have to remember, like, they do that, you do something else. And I think that's really like an important reminder to, like, I don't know. I love that stuff. I love thinking about that stuff and just how, and I guess that's the human element that's really important in recordings to me. Whether it be I'm just sitting here plinking out a bass line and it feels pretty cool, or if it's like I'm recording a piano player that's just like blowing my mind and it's something I could never do. I love that experience as well.
Yeah, I feel like every musician has to double down on what they do, and I've said this also before on the podcast. Is like, I think musicians sometimes even get bored of themselves because we know, like I know what I'm gonna do on the bass. Like I have these patterns that I think of, like, oh, that's so me. But for other people, that's not boring necessarily,
right?
Because it's like they're not in our brain. They're just they're enjoying the music, and so. I feel like our patterns that are sometimes like, it's like, okay, this is just what I do, whatever.
Right.
Are actually really interesting to other people.
Yeah. I did have that experience through lockdown, because I was in this room like every day, all day.
Yeah.
In my own head, like laying down tracks remotely for people or producing songs remotely for people, not getting that real-time feedback. I'm not really going to be like on a Zoom call while I'm working, usually. I mean, I did a few, but usually it's just me. And like in the pandemic, when you're not allowed to be in the room with someone else, I was like super tired of my own ideas. And I really was craving that collaborative experience, because when you're in the room with someone else, they're going to surprise you, or the song's going to take a direction that you probably wouldn't have taken it exactly. And those surprises to me are so valuable, because then it opens up the universe. When you get surprised, you react to that thing. And then you're going down this parallel universe of where you probably would have gone if you was by yourself. Like, does that make sense?
Yeah. It's the butterfly effect, right? It's like,
exactly.
Well, yeah. I love that also in music. And like, even when you're playing an instrument, you react to the tone, and that inspires how you play the instrument.
Yeah.
Which is super cool. Which is why actually buying a new instrument is not always a bad idea for inspiration.
Yeah.
Although maybe financially it's a bad idea, but that's a different question.
I'm definitely in agreement with that. I don't have a lot of gear. I have a lot of instruments in here, and I that's kind of I like gear as much as it's the next person, but I try to focus on tactile things that inspire me. Like even like a real synthesizer to me is a completely different instrument than a VST synthesizer. And I can so much more quickly get something cool and something that's inspiring, because it's an instrument that I'm touching, you know?
Yeah, it's a tactile experience.
Yeah, exactly. I think those are like, I think I just went through like 4 different ideas, and I was trying to just say that I like instruments, and my studio is pretty gear light, to be honest. I have some mics that are nice, and, you know, my monitoring is nice, but it's mostly instruments in here, stuff that I can bang on, and lots of like things that sound like songs when you play them.
I love it.
Yeah.
Can you tell me a bit about your approach to mixing? You know, are you entirely in the box? What does it look like for you when you start a mix?
Yes, I'm in the box. I like to reamp things out through guitar pedals, amplifiers, and things like that. It's basically a roundabout way of adding effects. But yeah, I'm mixing in the box. I predominantly use Cubase as my DAW,
Oh yeah, you told me.
which I think is maybe a weird thing. Like, or I don't know. It's such a.
You know what? In Israel, it's like the number one DAW.
Is it really?
Yes, and I actually I don't use Cubase. I don't know how to use it, but it always seemed a little bit clunky to me. But actually in Israel, it's super popular because it was like the number one. What's the word? Like Napster. Like it was like illegally downloaded by everyone.
Yeah.
In the 90s.
Right.
And so it just became like the default DAW of Israel.
That's hilarious.
And now everyone uses Cubase.
Well, that's interesting.
Now in recent years, Ableton and Logic and Pro Tools have had more of a resurgence, but Cubase is like the DAW of the nation, I would say.
That's really interesting. I don't feel like it's that popular here in the States.
No, it's definitely not.
It's more.
But people swear by it that use it.
Yeah. Well, I
know Dwayne uses Nuendo, which is like
does.
even more off kilter than
does.
Cubase.
Yeah, and of course I use Pro Tools as well and Logic. I did a bunch of mixes in Logic last year for an artist, but I prefer my own productions in Cubase. It suits my workflow. There's zero latency issues when you're tracking and you're already at like a done mix, and there's all kinds of processing on your master bus and all this stuff. I don't know how they do it, but there's like zero latency. It's kind of a beautiful thing, and I just think it sounds great. All the DAWs sound good. They all do the same stuff. It's kind of what you're comfortable with and what your workflow is, but I do like Cubase. But we were going to talk about mixing.
Fair enough. You could give me more of a spiel on Cubase if you want. I'm happy to hear it.
No, it's not really like a focal point right now, I guess. But I just thought it was interesting because like some people are like Cubase, like because Pro Tools and Logic are so huge here, and Ableton now too. But
yeah, not for the kind of music you're working on, but.
Right, exactly.
So are you kind of taking the mix out of the production session and starting a new project? And if so, like, what does that template look like?
Yeah.
Or are you kind of like mixing as you go?
For my own productions, I'm kind of always mixing. And I like this concept. And I feel like it's I hear some other people that I respect talking about it. It's like when you're working, it should always sound good, and it should always sound like a record, and it should always be inspiring. So I feel like I'm always kind of mixing as I go, save for like big automation moves or anything like that. I do tend to do a lot of automating in my mixes, and I usually save that for last, but tonally getting things popping and just getting the tones right and everything. I feel like I'm working on that always, and that involves decapitators and compressors and all the tools that are considered kind of mixing tools, you know. But other times I will get hired for just a mix, and that's a different thing. And sometimes I'll do that in Pro Tools. It is nice to start off from where they left their rough, and sometimes that's a Pro Tools session. Obviously, you have to have the same plugins, but
yeah.
And other times I get stems or wave files, and then you just bring it in. And I don't really have a template for mixing. It's always kind of a clean slate each time. Same goes for my productions. I mean, there are things in my templates like my routing and my reamping and any of that stuff, but in terms of having a mix template, I don't really do it. I feel like if I did, I would be deleting a lot of plugins right away, or maybe I would be inclined to use something out of not laziness, but like
default.
Yeah, default. My Echo Boys settings are just sitting there, and I should probably just use that effect for this, and rather than like, oh, what can I pull up? What am I really hearing in my mind that I want to pull up and carve out? I guess that's me. I know a lot of people use templates, and it's very
every effect is novel. Like every time you pull up a reverb or a delay, it's going to be a new
every time.
Wow.
And usually,
I feel like that's like.
Go ahead.
No, that's like one thing that I'm not at all like. Is I do have like a bunch of reverbs and delays that I've used over the years and kind of fine tuned, you know.
Sure.
And I'll just have them. I'll have like all those kind of buses set up in a mix. So I can easily get what because there's enough variety within those. There's like 10 of them that, I'll be able to find the kind of sound I'm looking for.
Yeah.
But
I think
there is something great about the beauty of, of just like everything gets its own thing, or every song gets its own room reverb or whatever it is.
I think it's definitely, I could definitely work the other way too. It's just how I do it. It's just how my brain works. And I don't know if this is typical, but like everything will get its own treatment, or like the amount of bussing and molting of different sounds is kind of maybe more than a lot of people do. Like it might look cumbersome to someone else, but to me, it's just how my brain works. Like, and then I don't have.
What would be an example of that the molting, like a mid range of the bass plus like a sub of the bass?
I guess a lot of people do those types of things. But even like, I mean, I don't know what I'm saying, and it's probably not that special. But I feel like I'll have like maybe there's a kick and then a kick sample and then a distorted version of something that's kick, and then like. And I'm routing all this through a kick channel, and then that's its own fader, and then like kind of each drum gets like I'm kind of separating. I always want something to be on its own fader and have its own. If there's an effect send on something, it's the only thing that's being sent to that effect. So I know exactly how to EQ that effect because I know exactly what is going through that channel. And that type of thing. And I'm doing lots of parallel processing these days on drums and on vocals, and maybe the way I'm routing those things is weird, or I don't know, maybe not, but
cool. Yeah. I do that also with like kicks and stuff. Like I what I love about Logic is the track stacks actually. So I'll use the track stacks as like a pre-bus. So every drum element will have a track stack. So there'll be a kick track stack, a snare track stack, overheads track stack, and they'll all kind of feed into the overall drum bus after that.
Amazing.
So
so Logic.
That's how
Logic makes it easy, I guess, in that way. That's really cool.
And I didn't do it. You know what? I was doing buses into buses, and I only did the track stack because I had to open somebody else's mix and work from there once. And I'm like, you know what? This track stack thing is kind of working for me.
Yeah.
So then I started using. Yeah.
And
you never know.
Doesn't Pro Tools do it now too? Like basically.
Yeah, they must have something. They must have something similar. I don't work on Pro Tools, but from what I've seen in videos, it looks like they do.
I think they just implemented something similar to that, like a year ago or something. I don't know.
Avid finally catching up. Wait, so in terms of like parallel processing, are you big on the parallel compression thing? Is that your jam?
It's not always compression. I do like parallel distortion. I know saturation's a big word right now, and it's a lot of people are doing it, but it really is a sound, and it is a modern. I don't know. I like it.
Saturation is the modern sound. That is what I'm learning.
Yeah, and it's really a sound that I like, and I a lot of times I'm doing it in parallel, rather than just like, oh, we're gonna smash the drum kit. You kind of do it in parallel, and you sneak it under, so you're getting. It's almost like a compression effect, because that's what I guess like a distortion box is, compressing something to a certain extent,
right? Or as like Andrew was saying on his pod, Andrew Mari was saying on his podcast, is it's just density, right? Like you're adding more,
yeah, he was talking about a lot of that,
more weight to the sound,
right? I mean, all the plugins now have mix knobs, which is awesome.
Yes. I was going to ask you if you're using mix knobs or if you're kind of like doing it on multiple faders. And I've heard people say that they prefer it on multiple faders. Yeah. I'm not totally sure why.
I don't know. Like I think I do it on faders. Like a lead vocal, I'll have it on 2 faders going into some other bus, because I'll be adjusting that a lot throughout the mix.
Right. Automating it.
Yeah, automating it, and just really getting it in the sweet spot for each section of the song or something, where a mix, not even like on the UAD stuff, I don't think the mix knobs even have like a numerical value. You kind of have to eyeball it sometimes.
It's percentage, yeah. And it's like, that is, you don't really know what you're doing when you're mixing it.
Right.
I feel that. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It's like, okay, what's 50% versus 5% of a mix knob, on a lead vocal? Like, I don't really know.
Yeah, I guess it's...
Is that like
Yeah.
minus 20 and minus 15? Maybe. Like,
But I love that they all have mix knobs on them. That's great. It's really cool. And I use it all the time.
Yeah. Do you do anything that helps you work faster in the studio in general? Like, just like...
Well, I guess the first thing that comes to mind is just having everything ready to go and everything patched in. So like here at my studio, I don't have a ton of stuff, like I said, but I've got my upright piano. I've got this guitar rig set up over here, a bunch of guitars, a MIDI keyboard, a real synth, a drum kit. It's not this way today because I'm about to set up for a different workflow for a few recordings. But usually I like to have everything patched in, and the studio is working as kind of one brain, and everything's synced. And like, if I have an inspired idea, I literally just reach over and lay it down, and that's kind of that's important for working fast and in the moment.
Love it.
I guess.
Yeah, Dwayne was saying similar stuff also on his episode.
Oh, really cool.
He doesn't have patch bass. He just every channel is what it is. He knows what it is. It's just
that's right. I remember him saying that. Yeah, it really does help when you're producing, to just have everything kind of ready to go. And maybe that's another reason that I don't love like scrolling through presets on samplers or any VSTs, because then I lose the moment, and then I'm like, oh, that sounds sucks, or like, all right, moving on to the next, and then that one's not right either, and then 30 minutes later you still don't have your sound when you could just be like rocking some other thing.
Yeah, I feel that when the artist is in the room and I'm looking for kind of drum groove. So if I'm let's say in Steven Slate Drums 5, looking for like a drum groove based in there just to get an inspiration, like the artist is in the back of the room bored, like it might be better if I just, I actually sold my drum set, but if I like even just come up with a drum part on a MIDI keyboard is sometimes more effective than trying to look for the right kind of rhythm. Yeah. Because you could just do it so fast as a musician with your intuition to kind of just lay it out, and then nobody's bored. Right. But scrolling through that stuff is like, it's a time suck, and like I don't think artists like it. Like I think maybe they're into like scrolling through Instagram when that happens. I don't know, but
I think that there are producers that are they have such a vast knowledge of their sample library, and they have organizational techniques where they just know exactly how to get those sounds happening. I have not really been so smart in that way with my sample libraries. I have tons of great sounds that I like to use, but they get used more in the mix or whatever like that. When I'm producing, it's more like I said, I come at everything as a musician. It's like, let me just sit at the drums, even if we're recording this as a scratch drum part with one mic.
But the idea is there,
and it's gonna feel better than me trying to program it in the MIDI roll or whatever. And like, I totally vibe with that. Yeah. As a guitarist, I want to ask you if what your thoughts are on virtual amplifiers versus real versus, I don't know, the what are they called, the Kempers, that kind of stuff. Like what are you doing? What do you think works? Anything works. If you can make it work. The plugins, some of them I think are pretty cool. Like UAD, their Fender's really good. I use that a lot for sketching out ideas. I usually end up redoing stuff, but sometimes it makes it to the final mix. Kempers, I did use Kempers on a tour, and I could never get it sounding quite right, but I think that it's probably gotten better, and maybe it just takes more time to sit down and program that stuff. You have to really be a good programmer. Some of the plugins just don't cut it, but there's good stuff out there. I'd prefer real guitar amps. As a guitarist, I haven't quite found a replacement for the real thing in terms of amps.
I've heard every answer on this show, and it's all legit.
What do you think?
I mean, I don't own an amp. I'm a bass player, so I don't. I've never invested in a guitar amp. I've always been able to make it work with the plugins. Yeah. I'm actually really enjoying the Corey Wong amp.
Oh yeah.
It's Neural DSP. And I got some really cool, actually like fuzzy tones out of it.
Cool.
On a production I'm working on now. I was using the one that came with the Slate bundle for a while, and they discontinued it, and I'm blanking on what it was called. That I actually really liked, and maybe I should just buy it.
Yeah.
But that was cool, and what they replaced it with I didn't like as much. And I've tried some of the Waves ones, like the PRS, and it's okay.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, I feel the same way. Like some of them do sound really good. I used a UAD makes a SVT. Is it Ampeg?
I love that.
Yeah, it sounded awesome, and I totally just
I got the plug. I have the plug. I don't have UA, so I have the Plug-in Alliance one.
Right. It's the same plugin though, right? I think.
It's sick.
Yeah.
Yes.
It sounded great, and I've been using that a bit on stuff. Even if it's later, and when I'm mixing, I'll put that on my bass, and
that works for me. I'm into that kind of bass tone, like old school, like Motown, Beatles kind of tones.
Oh yeah.
So I got like you can see like the violin bass.
Yeah.
It's actually the Epiphone, it's the viola bass.
Yeah.
So that or a P bass kind of tone with flat wounds.
Oh my gosh.
That SVT is just spot on.
We're on the same page. I have a P bass from the 70s with flats, and it's just killer. And I love those violas, and I love that thumpy Beatles thing. It's really like you can't go wrong. I don't ever really reach for like any bass sound if it's a bass guitar other than that vibe, you know?
Yeah, I think I haven't said it in a while, but I'm really not a jazz bass guy. Like I don't like the jazz bass. It emphasizes all the wrong mid-range frequencies in my opinion.
Yeah, I've never been into it either.
It's like too much 2K, not enough like, 600, like which is where like the P bass lives. And I feel like that just blends so much nicer in a band.
Yeah.
And now that I'm playing this like viola bass, that's pretty much all I'm playing now. Because I could get it to sound aggressive, but also warm and big.
Yeah. Do you play with a pick or do you play?
No.
Fingers?
I mean, I can, not well. Fingers, yeah.
Cool.
And I do a lot of thumb work these days.
Muting
and also I palm muting with my right hand.
I love that sound.
So I'm big on that now.
Cool.
Which is, I don't know. I come from the old school, so that's my jam.
Yeah.
As a bass player, obviously, I had a Red Hot Chili Peppers slap in the bass phase. You
got to.
I'm not there anymore. Yeah.
Oh, I mean, I had a Metallica like solos, like learning the solos phase, and I can't do that shit now. maybe I could, but like, it's not really.
Oh, totally. In 8th grade, I was all about the Black Album, so I get it,
man. Oh my gosh.
Totally. Yeah, it's great stuff. Awesome. Okay, cool. I think let's move on to the Sauce segment and have a listen to what we've been talking about so people can hear for themselves.
Okay, great.
So you sent me a song called Thorns by Ashley Strongarm, and so I'm just going to pull it up and we'll have a quick listen and then we'll talk about it.
Awesome.
I guess that's the difference between me and him. He's got himself a mean streak, but I'm filled to the brim. He's fighting off his demons, I prefer to let mine in. He says it feels good when he's doing good, I feel better when I sin. Did you think there was more to my hands than the thorns that you felt when you were holding them? And did you think there's more to my kiss than poison that you tasted on my lips? Did you think I was more than this? Did you think I was more than this? I guess that's the notion that some people get. Said he's drowning in an ocean, I'm in someone else's bed. He brought flowers to my front door to mourn someone he'll forget. But I died long before he loved me, I just ain't been buried yet. Did you feel
Yeah, Justin, love this production.
Oh, thanks. Thank you.
It's so full. It's just all the aspects are just very big and rich, like the drum, as I mentioned, like the drums are just so big.
Yeah.
And I love those like those kind of like plucky guitars on the sides that really kind of give the song like a lot of movement.
Yeah.
Those. Tell me a bit about that song. What went into it?
Those plucky guitars. So back to me sort of like preferring to kind of record things, and then sometimes those things become my samples. That plucky guitar thing on the sides started out as like a bass guitar note or two, just plucked really high up on the neck, which I then dragged into a sampler and played it on a keyboard, kind of lazy and kind of, off the grid, which is another conversation, really, just trying to keep things off the grid and just being just a little bit more swing and a little bit more human. Anyways, those are samples from a bass guitar that I was playing on a keyboard, and I thought it sounded kind of like a clavinet or something, like really percussive, but also melodic. So that was a fun sound to kind of stumble on. Yeah.
Not what I was expecting. I thought it was like a Strat or a Tele.
Yeah, well, it does the job, right? It sounds like a guitar, and it does the job of a guitar, but it's something a little bit different. And I love that stuff too. When you've got like, I'm hearing drums and there's a bass and there's these plucky guitars and cool. Like you kind of understand the genre and you kind of understand the feeling and emotion behind the song. But all of those instruments have like their own signature, and maybe there's more layers to those sounds that you're not really aware of. I like that kind of secretive, like more went into the sound than you realize. I like that stuff.
Yeah. I love like just like that Americana vibe. Her vocals are amazing.
Oh, Ashley's incredible. Ashley Strongarm. So yeah, actually kind of it's a new collaboration. I'm very excited about what we're doing together. So there's this song, and we released another single called Pushing Daisies, and we have a bunch more in the works. And it's just me and her really. I've had a couple people play on it, but yeah, I'm super excited about the project. I'm really glad you liked the song, and I was happy to share it here on your show.
Yeah, for sure. It was released. I saw it was released. It was on Spotify.
Yeah, it just came out a few weeks ago, and there's a video coming too.
Amazing. Any other things that you did on the production that are of note that people would want to hear about? Maybe.
Well, like I said, I was hitting the drums really quietly. I think I added some kick sample, but for the most part, it's an acoustic kit, just with my my parallel distortions and my processing. And I like this idea. I feel like when I started out, I would layer the hell out of songs and just throw everything at them, and it would be this 1,000 bajillion tracks, and everything sounds like you can't really hear anything because everything's going. But I've gotten into the idea that it's not really like less is more necessarily, but doing more with less is a concept that I like. So if you've got drums and a bass and a guitar thing, and that's kind of all that's going on, and nothing's stepping on anything else, and the arrangement's really good and like clears the way for the vocal, then those drums can be huge. You can really make each individual thing have like, you can push it and make it big and blow it up for the listener. I love that stuff. I love those sounds, and a lot of modern music, right, has this massive low end going on right now, and the tracks are pretty sparse because that's how you get a massive low end, is if your track's not full of other things sharing that frequency. But not to say that my song with Ashley is that vibe at all, but the concept of like being able to really make the drums bigger because they don't have to fight with much else. Like I kind of like that.
I love that. I feel like a lot of people, especially at the beginning of production journeys, are doing the stacking thing where you're just putting too many things. Yeah. And often it's just too many things in the low mids.
Right.
And like,
muddy.
How are you going to make room for all that stuff,
But then again,
just don't put it.
My song, I feel like my song with Ashley, this song is Ashley's song, I should say, that I produced, is pretty dense. Actually,
it's quite dense.
It's quite dense in the chorus, especially. But I think if you have a good arrangement and you're aware of those frequency ranges when you're producing the track, you can really you can get away with it if you're smart, you know?
Yeah, well, I think you did a great job at it, and
Thank you.
it really it's as like you said, like it's dense, but everything has its place, and it gels really nicely.
Her vocal performance kills me on that.
Yeah, her vocals are amazing.
Yeah, I spent.
You just tracked this in your room, in your studio here?
Yeah, we tracked it here. I really spend a lot of time on vocals when I mix, and I know that's not very unique. It's kind of what you should do, but yeah, with Ashley, she makes it easy because she's such a great singer, and I just get to have fun painting effects around her and stuff like that. Another fun thing about that track is, like I was saying, sometimes a song will see like 4 different versions. Thorns was one of those, and actually before our call, I was looking at older versions of it because I knew we were going to talk about it, and I had forgotten that in the chorus there's this like pulsing sort of synthy thing, and I realized looking back that I had layered all these guitars in an older version of that song that were kind of doing a 16th note thing, because you know the drums are just quarter notes basically,
right,
like
just,
the hi-hat even is just quarter notes.
Right.
So there's not a lot of rhythmic stuff propelling the song, but that chorus really needed.
Right. It's almost like that Fleetwood Mac thing where you're just holding down that basic groove to let the song kind of sit on top. You know?
And maybe the acoustic guitar is working as percussion because the drums are leaving the space for that to happen. So on the chorus to this, there's this 16th note pulsing thing, and I realized that it was a bunch of guitar tracks that didn't make the cut on some other version, and I ran them through a vocoder. And I've got like a bunch of sound toys, you know, like Tremolator or something on there. And it's creating this pulse. And because I felt like the chorus needed to have like a propulsive feeling, and the drums aren't doing it. So how do we get this like intensity out of the chorus? And you feel like, I don't know, I just picture like driving really fast through a tunnel or like being in a train in that chorus. And I wanted that effect. And so I took all these guitar tracks and I just mangled the hell out of them and ran them through all kinds of stuff. And they kind of create a 16th note pattern that I feel like becomes part of the rhythm track, which I had forgotten about. And then I just went back today.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
It's like you could do amazing sound design with organic instruments. You just have to be creative.
Yeah.
You know?
It's like I said, that's where I'm at. It's more fun for me to just create all my own sounds if possible. And they're all unique. I don't reuse sounds a ton. Maybe some drum samples here and there, but...
Yeah. I don't know. I don't usually ask such like specific gear questions, but just out of curiosity, what mic did you use on her voice?
That is a Flea 47.
Dope. It sounds really, really luxurious.
It's the nicest mic that I own. They're not cheap. They're very well made clones of the old stuff. And I love that mic. I really love that mic. I don't always love it for everything, clearly.
Right. 47 is a very, very specific sound. A lot of like low mids.
It is. And
you know,
I'll usually reach for ribbons or dynamics for a lot of stuff, even vocals, but that Flea is really beautiful, and it really worked for Ashley's voice.
Yeah, brilliant. And one more question about the song, and we can move on from the saw segment. Was are you bottom miking the snare as well? Because it's got a nice ring to it.
Not usually.
Really?
But I do use a bottom mic. You know, sometimes what I do if I have if I want to keep things, if I don't want a bunch of cables in my room, just keep a few mics up. I'll forgo the bottom mic, and sometimes I'll take a sample of it and I'll trigger it. So whether or not I had a bottom mic on the snare drum for that song, I can't say accurately, but I don't usually put a mic there. I like a thuddier sound on a snare. I'm usually scooping out the stuff that a bottom mic would have been providing. I don't know if that's crazy, but I really like.
Yeah, no, it's. Yeah, I mean, I've heard a wide variety of answers, and I've actually had really good success without miking the bottom.
Yeah, me too. And of course, if I'm in a studio and we have all the mics in the world and we're doing a drum session, I'll put one there for sure. But in my room, when I'm just like, if I feel like I need it later, I can use a sample of that, of like even the same drum in the same space, and it'll do the job.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. One thing I heard I don't remember which interview it was, about a reason to use an under mic is just to get rid of some of that hi-hat. Like it's hard to or rather it's hard to get the high end of the snare back from the top mic because of the hi-hat.
Yeah.
So
that does make sense.
An advantage of having the actual snare mic is that on the bottom, meaning where you're actually capturing the snares, is that you could get the top end of the snare without the hi-hat in the way, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I'm not remembering who said that. It was in the last 15 episodes or so.
Cool. That makes a lot of sense.
Maybe it might have been Caleb Parker who works with Wolfpack and Pomplamoose and Scary Pockets.
Oh, cool.
He does a lot of live funk recordings.
Amazing.
Yeah. So anyways, interesting stuff.
Yeah.
Do you have any practices to stay fresh and creative? It could be routines. We all have days that we're not as inspired as others. So how do you kind of keep yourself ready to go in the studio?
Well, I don't meditate, but I do like to run. I'll go for a run in the morning or something like that, kind of get my head clear. I try to come to the studio every day and work. If there's a day where I'm not feeling it, or I get here and I'm uninspired and I feel like I can't get anything done, I'll go for a walk, or a good one to do is if you're deep in a mix or something and you kind of lost your mind, maybe just put on some different music, like different genre, different volume, different everything, and just
cleanse the palette.
Yeah, and then clean your studio. I love cleaning the space, organizing while I have some other music on that's not the music that I'm working on, and it usually gets me back into a headspace where I feel like I have perspective again. When that mix comes back up and I hit play, I'll be like, oh, there's some clarity, and then you keep working. But
yeah,
I also try to plan a day off a week or something like that. It doesn't always happen, but it's nice to be like, you know what, I'm gonna take Sunday, not gonna do any music on Sunday, and just fill up your day with something else, and just kind of refuel the tank. That's important to me too.
I'm big on the Sabbath, so
right.
That's my jam.
Yeah,
I've talked about it already ad nauseum, I think, on the podcast. But having a day off is huge. Love it. Yeah. Oh, so so you mentioned that you have a relationship with Justin Perkins. Is he your go-to mastering engineer? And also, do you ever send off for mixing as well?
Justin has been doing some stuff of mine recently, but he hasn't been my go-to for very long. He's kind of new to me. Like we've talked so much about Dwayne Lundy. He recommended Justin for a record that I had been working on. Dwayne was kind of co-producing and engineering some of the record for me, and we used Justin, and it went great. And he's just a very thorough, very professional guy, and does fantastic work. So I've been sending stuff to him. I think, definitely he did the song Thorns that we just listened to. More so, I've been using TJ Lipple. He's another guy. Have you heard of TJ Lipple?
No.
He's
I haven't.
He produced an album for my band a long time ago, and he's just a brilliant mixer and mastering engineer and musician. And so I send a lot to him as well. I've sent stuff recently to Greg Calby, and that was cool.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't normally send out for mix. I usually mix my own productions. There's occasionally where I feel like I lost perspective on it or something, and I'll just be like, someone else needs to help me here because I lost my way. But usually the mix is so intertwined with the production, and it's all happening all the time until the song is done. And then I feel like the song is done. I know a lot of people do that and still send out for mix, and the mixer doesn't do much. They just kind of, it's almost like a pre-mastering clean up, and I haven't.
The vocal's a tiny bit honky. There's a bit of too much 4K in the guitar, like that kind of stuff.
I think that's cool. I would love, honestly, I think it would be really interesting to start sending out for mix more. I think I'm in this place where I just have people that I just I just love their work. And I'm like, you know what? I would love to send a track to that person and just see what they do with it. If budgets allow, then maybe I'll start doing that more. I think that's a fun idea. But up to now, I really have been, I try to stay in control of everything until it's done, just because I think it's my nature to do that.
Yeah, it's all. I think we're all like that a little bit. Like we're all like, maybe some of it is ego, but we want to. We've had our hands all over this project. We want it to kind of sound how we think it needs to sound.
Are you that way too? Do you send out for mix, or do you do most of your stuff?
Yeah, I think I rarely send out for mixing.
Mm-hmm.
I'm mostly mixing my stuff. I also like mixing, and I'm trying to do more mixing, as much mixing as I can.
Yeah.
I also like. I mean, I'm not at the point of giving up production. Like I want to do a bit of both, but I mixing is something that I'm always trying to strive to do more.
Yeah.
So it's something that I'm trying to keep in house.
Cool.
Because I love it so much. But part of it is ego. I'm sure if I had less of an ego and was willing to let go of some stuff, I might be able to finish some projects that I haven't finished yet. So, yeah, I don't know. There's a part. I think people that do what we do, we want to hang on to that level of control. And even when mastering comes back, sometimes I'm like, okay, wait, maybe they overdid it,
right. And
then I'll give another. Like I literally today, I was like, oh, he overdid on the mastering, and then I listened to another set of monitors, like, oh, he didn't actually overdo it, and it's hard to let go. But I think a lot of that is just ego, and like other people that do what we do are great, and I don't know. It's I'm still learning, I guess.
I'm still learning too. I think everyone's always still learning. Yeah. Do you master much of your own stuff? No.
I mean, I've like faux mastered a lot in the past, and I'm trying less and less to do that. Like one of my biggest takeaways of doing the podcast is like what a mastering engineer actually brings to the table, and for me, that's that objectivity of like, hey, I'm signing off on it. This is good. Like, did I get the low end right? Is the top end the right amount? Just those last things, just to say like you did it or you didn't do it. And I don't have a Vari Mu compressor or massive passive, so sometimes that adds a little bit of vibe. Although I think it's, I don't know. I'm not a mastering engineer. It definitely adds vibe sometimes, and I don't know if it's always necessary.
Yeah.
I've had mastering engineers overdo it.
Yeah.
Because usually, like when I send off a mix for master, it's pretty much where it is, and sometimes I'm leaving a little bit of room to extra, finagle some more saturation or compression or whatever in the master. But often it's pretty dialed in, so it's hard to know. It depends, I guess.
Yeah. Right.
That's my journey right now where I'm at with it.
Yeah.
So
I don't like mastering my own stuff for that reason. I feel like it is really important, especially if you produced it and you mixed it and you've heard it a gajillion times, to have someone with really good ears be like, this is what I think will help this translate to the world, to the speakers of the world. And
their monitoring is probably way better than whatever we have.
Yeah, exactly.
Totally. Just a couple more questions, and I think we can wrap it. And you probably have a feeling that this question, if you've listened to this podcast, you know this question is coming. So looking back on your journey in production and mixing and everything you're doing, what would you tell your younger self today, knowing what you know now of maybe a mistake that you made in the past or something that you did right, like hey, Justin, keep at that, or Justin, maybe don't do that. What would be that one piece of advice that you'd give your former self?
I did know about this question because I have been listening to your podcast, which I love. I love your podcast.
Thank you.
Yeah,
wow.
I do. It's hard for me to say one thing because no regrets. Right, and also mistakes that you make can be valuable if you learn from them and if you do better the next round. That being said, I guess what I would say to myself is kind of the same thing that I still have to say to myself all the time, which is like trust your instincts. There's a reason you're in the room with this person working on this music. There's a reason. You can bring something to the table, even in those moments where we have a low self-esteem or imposter syndrome creeps in, it's important to just squash that, because it can really inhibit the creative process, and that's the worst thing that could happen.
Yeah.
So yeah, just valuing what you bring to the table, having the confidence to bring it, and know your strengths, and just that I guess that's what I would say to myself then, and I have to say these things to myself still.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
My follow-up question to that is, do you have any tips for overcoming imposter syndrome? And, we all suffer, with that sometimes. So,
Yeah.
do you have any advice? Like, like when I was playing bass on tour, I never got stage fright, but when you're playing in front of an audience that like really, like I went on a Russian tour with Alex Clare, and we're playing these clubs with like 600 people.
Right.
That it's not that many people, but it's like people really want to see this artist. And for the first time in like, I don't know, over a decade, I had stage fright.
Wow.
I was like, okay, I guess I'm gonna have a shot of whiskey, and then I like this could be a big problem. Like you don't want to go down you don't want to go down that path.
Right.
So anyways, like I'm sure that's not a good way to go down that path, but maybe you have some tips for us.
Well, the imposter syndrome thing is it's a tricky one, because listen, for instance, like me being on this podcast, I felt a little bit like, why am I getting asked to do this production podcast? Like I've been listening to your podcast. I love your podcast. I'm nervous to come and be on it, because I'm like, what do I have to say? And this is just the kind of, I think, the thinking that we're talking about, right? Whereas, of course,
you're clearly qualified to come on this show. But it's just me. But I'm just like a dude.
Until I got on here and we started chatting, and I now feel very comfortable. I'm sort of an introvert, and it is hard for me to like, the thought of coming on an interview and talking about myself makes me nervous. It's just, it is what it is. And there are sessions I've been in, and I'm like, why am I here surrounded by all these professional, like amazing people? Why am I in the room? And I think it goes back to kind of where I started with this conversation. When I was starting out producing and starting out recording with Dwayne, and like, he knew what he was doing. I didn't know what I was doing necessarily. I was just that was my school, and I was learning by doing, and I was talented enough, I think, to be in that room and bring something to the table. And so when you feel that imposter syndrome creep in, you just have to squash it, and you just have to show up and be professional and do your best that you can do. And then you're probably going to be okay. You're probably going to be fine. And you're probably going to grow from that situation. And you're going to feel that experience is just going to be a part of your growth, as a professional or as a musician or as a human being. So I don't know if that's advice or what I just said. I already forgot. But
just one foot in front of the other, right? Just like just keep at it. There's a reason. Like you're already there, so like you have to believe that there's a reason why you're there.
Yeah, and just do your best.
I love that.
Do your best and be kind to.
Yes, being a good human is the basic 101 of success in music.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
Because music, again, it's relationship based. Profession, and you really just have to be a good person and work hard, and you're going to be okay.
Amen. Well, Justin, this was really, really, really fun. Great to meet you and schmooze with you. I learned a lot. I'm sure the audience did too.
Cool.
What's the best way to find you on the interwebs?
I am horrible at the self-promotion and the visibility. I do have a website under construction, so that's not a thing, but it will be. I guess you can find me on Instagram. Feel free to hit me up there if you have questions or anything. I don't use it that much, and I don't. Yeah, I'm not great at the social media stuff, but I do have Instagram, and it's at Justin W. Craig.
Awesome. Well, I'll put a link in the show notes. People can go find you there. And
cool.
Justin, thank you so much for taking the time to do this. Great to meet you, and maybe I'll see you in Brooklyn at some point.
Yeah, likewise. Thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed the show, and I love what you're doing.
Pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Secret Sonics. I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Justin as much as I did. If you enjoyed this episode or any of our other episodes, I'd super appreciate it if you would go to Apple Podcasts and leave us a rating and review. It really helps the show. And if you could share this episode or your favorite episode with a friend or two, that would also really help the show move forward. In addition to that, you can find us on social media. Just search for Secret Sonics. We're on Facebook. We're on Instagram. And you can email me at secretsonics@gmail.com if you have any comments, feedback, guests you might want to recommend, anything like that. So that's about it for now. Until next time, I hope you guys have a great week. Stay safe out there and dig in. Bye-bye.